Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. So if you clicked on this video today, you want to learn how to make these delicious Tipsy cinnamon rolls. So let's get into it. In a bowl, I warmed up some milk. You don't want it to be too hot, just warm. And then you want to pour in your dry active yeast. Whisk it really good until it looks a little bit like a bowl of cereal. Once you do that, you want to set your bowl aside and let it sit for about 5 to 7 minutes. So I have my stand mixer here. In the bowl I have my flour. Now I use bread flour, but you can use all-purpose flour if that's all you can get a hold of too. It comes out the same. I'm going to pour in that milk and yeast mixture. Now at this point it really doesn't matter in which order you add the rest of your ingredients. So I'm going to add that salted butter. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a turn. With the bread attachment, it really doesn't get going until it turns into dough. I'm going to crack in the eggs. Now, if you're not good at cracking eggs, do it in a separate bowl. It's okay, because you don't want shells in your dough. Now I'm going to take my spatula and just help the mixer mix everything together. Your mixture might look a little dry at this point, but that's okay. Don't add anything else. I'm going to add the sugar, if it all wants to come out the bowl. Excuse me y'all, technical difficulties. So again, you want to take your spatula and just help work the dough together. I'm gently folding it in just until it looks a little bit more like some dough and it's easier to work with. So after about 3 minutes, you'll get a mixture that looks a little bit like this. Now you might have some more flour still at the bottom. That's okay. You can take your hand like I did and just mix it together and put that flour on top of your dough. So after that, I turned my mixer on for about 5 more minutes and just allowed it to go and knead the dough. You should have a little something like this, and now you're ready for the next step. Look at y'all that made some dough. I don't never want to hear that y'all can't do nothing from scratch now. Okay, on to the next step. I'm going to lightly flour my countertop, spread that out a little bit, because now I'm going to hand knead my dough. So what that is just taking the palm of your hand and just kneading the dough, folding it over after every time. If you feel like your dough is a little too dry, you can wet your hands with some milk or a little bit of water and just go back to kneading your dough. After about 5 minutes of hand kneading your dough, you just want to work it into a little ball and you're finished. There you go. So in a large bowl, I'm going to lightly grease it with some canola oil. You can use vegetable oil if you want to, it doesn't matter. I'm using a paper towel here, but you just want to make sure that you get oil all around your bowl because you're going to let your dough rise and it's going to probably double in size. So you want to make sure that you're lightly greasing the whole bowl before you put your dough in. I'm also going to pour a little bit of oil on top of the dough just because you don't want it to dry out while you're letting it rise. Rub that in. And then cover your bowl with a dish towel. I'm going to store this bowl in my microwave, or you can store it in your turned off oven for about an hour or hour and a half. While that's rising, we're going to start on our icing. So on high heat, I'm melting 2 sticks of butter. Now the key to this part is you do not want to walk away from this butter. You want to stay on top of it the whole time or you'll burn it. After about 4 minutes, it's going to look a little something like this. Don't be alarmed. This is what you want it to look like. But you want to continuously stir it. You want to continue to stir for about 3 minutes or until your butter looks like this. Until it's brown and the bubbles have started to disappear. It really doesn't smell like nothing, to be completely honest, but it's going to taste really good with your icing. Okay, here's the fun part. So you can take the dark liquor of your choosing, I chose Hennessy, and pour it into your butter. Now I used about 1/4 of a cup, but be careful because you'll see it starts to bubble up and you don't want it to come out of your pot. So if you want your cinnamon rolls to be alcohol free, you can totally skip that step. If you want them to be a little bit stronger, you can add some more. It's totally your choice and it's all okay with me. Once that's all mixed together, transfer it to a bowl and put it in the fridge to chill. Now let's make the spread that's going to go inside the cinnamon rolls. So I softened about 2 sticks of butter, cut them into cubes. Now I want to add the brown sugar, and the cinnamon. So I'm going to start by mixing with my stand mixer just to try to get the clumps out and smooth it out before I use my spatula. If you're like me and you're making a mess and getting butter all over the place, you can start with your spatula too. Okay y'all, quick tip. Please make sure that your butter is softened, not melted, just softened. It's a little bit harder to work with, but you don't want your butter to be melted because then your buns will explode in the oven. So once your spread looks like this, you're done. Ready for the next step. So it's been about an hour and a half and I'm ready to take the dough out of the microwave. You see it's kind of doubled in size? That's exactly what you want it to look like. So I'm going to transfer it from the bowl back to the countertop after I lightly flour it a little bit. Now we're going to knead the dough just for about 2 to 3 minutes. Again, when you knead the dough, you're just taking the palm of your hands and working the dough, flipping it over after every time. After that, we're going to just turn it into another little ball and get our rolling pin. I'm going to lightly flour the rolling pin just because you don't want it to stick to the dough while you're rolling it out. Once you begin rolling out your dough, you're going to see it's a little bit tough. That's okay. It's going to take you about a good 10 minutes to get your dough where you want it to be, but you want to continuously roll it into a square. Once you're done, your square should be ½ inch thick. Not too thick, but not too thin. If you rip it, then it's definitely too thin. Now it's time to spread. Get your bowl and a little bit at a time, add the spread to the center of the dough. You don't want to add it all at once because you don't want to overspread your dough and that'll also cause them to explode in the oven. So you want to create a thin layer of spread throughout the whole surface of the dough. Once you're done, you'll get something that looks like this. Again, just want to lightly spread all over the dough. And now it's time to roll. So this part can be a little bit tough at first. You want to pull and tuck your dough as you roll it, making sure that the roll is extra tight. So pull and tuck and roll until you move to the next row. See, I'm pulling and tucking before I roll it. Pull, tuck, and roll. You just want to keep singing that in your head like it's a song. It's a little bit easier when your dough's a little bit thicker, but you can see I'm pulling it and tucking it before I continue to roll it. That makes sure that your dough is nice and tight when it's time to cut it. After you rolled, you want to pinch the edges. Look at me ripping it, but that's okay. You want to pinch the edges to make sure that everything sticks together. Because if you don't, let's say it together, it's gonna explode in the oven. Now it's time to cut your rolls. So I like to cut my rolls into about 2-inch pieces. Once you cut it, it should look something like that in the inside, nice and tight. I'm gonna do it one more time because if you're like me, you need to see things a couple times. So a 2-inch piece and it's rolled nice and tight in the inside. So you can use a baking sheet or a baking pan. I'm going to use a 9x13 baking pan and I'm going to line it with some parchment paper. I'm going to take my rolls and place them inside my baking pan about 2 inches apart. If you're using a baking pan like me, you're probably going to have more than one pan of rolls, and that's okay. So again, I'm just taking my rolls, placing them inside about 2 inches apart. Now at this point, I'm going to cover them with some cling wrap because we're going to sit and let them rise for about 20 minutes. I know you might be tempted to skip this step, but please don't skip it. It's really important. See, I told you didn't want to skip this step. After about 20 minutes, you'll come back and they would have grown in size, so you might need to move them around in the pan a little bit just to still give them some space. And now it's time to bake. You're going to bake your rolls in the oven that's set on 350 for about 15 minutes or until they're golden in color. Whew. Okay, final step. Let's finish your icing. So in my mixing bowl, I put my softened cream cheese, and I'm just going to turn that on a low setting and just allow it to beat it up a little bit. I'm going to use my spatula just to move it to the center of the bowl so I continue to soften the cream cheese. Now I want to start by adding half of my powdered sugar. Now you want to add it a little bit at a time, because if not, it could just really fly everywhere and it'll make a mess. So once that's all poured in, you want to let your mixer do its work, and you can help it with the spatula too. Just folding it in until it's all incorporated. Now you want to pour in your butter. Slowly pour in your butter while the mixer is going on a high speed, and allow it to mix everything together. Now you don't have to brown your butter if you don't want to. You can just melt it and pour it in at this point. I'm going to use my spatula and just continue to help fold it in until it's mixed all together and all the clumps are out. Once that's done, it'll look a little something like this, and you can go ahead and add the rest of your powdered sugar. Again, I'm going to take my spatula and fold it in. Keep folding until it's all mixed together and it looks a little something like this. So you can skip this step, but I wanted to add a little bit more Hennessy. Again, if you want to make this non-alcoholic, skip the liquor altogether. Once you're all done, it'll look a little something like this, and it tastes so good. Y'all, I pulled these rolls out the oven. I wish y'all could smell it. Oh my gosh, they smell so good. And they look good too. So if your rolls came out good, give yourself a pat on the back, because I know this wasn't easy. So I like to ice my rolls really heavily, just because I feel like it just takes me back to being in the mall, going to the Cinnabon place, and getting extra icing. I'm sorry y'all, I gotta eat one. These are so good. But don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.